The Tennessee Titans had a disappointing 2024 season. Now they have the #1 overall pick and an offseason with a lot on the line. So in this video, let's go ahead and do my mock offseason for the Tennessee Titans. But if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, hit the like and subscribe button. We just hit 10K, so now let's shoot for 20K. Let's hop into it. So the way the video is going to work is we are going to be doing everything that the Tennessee Titans are going to be doing this offseason. We're going to begin by managing their finances in the team assets portion of the video. Then after that, we're going to go over some of the team free agents. We're going to talk about which guys we're going to re-sign and who we're going to let walk. Then of course, we'll talk about some positional team needs. And then last, we'll go ahead and end off with my free agency plan and then 2 3-round mock drafts. With that all said, let's begin the team assets portion of the video. Right now, the Tennessee Titans have around $44 million to work with, which is a good number, but for me, I want to do a lot of things this offseason, so it's not a perfect number. To go along with the $44 million, they also do have 8 draft picks, so keep that in mind. Unfortunately, they don't have a 3rd round pick, so unfortunately, the mock draft is going to be a little bit short today. But in order to open up a little bit of some extra money, we're going to go ahead and extend Amani Hooker, which is going to open up around $6 million. Amani Hooker has just been a really solid safety for this team for quite some time. I think he's been one of the better safeties that this team has had in a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and make sure we have him locked up for the future. It opens us up a little bit of cap space for this year as well. We're also going to be restructuring the deal of Harold Landry and, of course, Jeffrey Simmons. By doing so, that'll open up an additional $18 million of cap space to work with in 2025. And when it comes to cutting some players, we're going to go ahead and cut Kenneth Murray, which opens up $7.5 million, as well as Nicholas Petit-Frere, which will open up $3.5 million. So after all those moves, we went from $44 million now all the way up to around $79 million. With that extra money, we can go a little bit more deep into free agency. We can also re-sign a couple more players that I would like to bring back. So ultimately, this is a number that I feel really confident with. But then we get to the team free agents portion of the video, and for the Tennessee Titans, they actually do have a very long list of team free agents. They have names like Mason Rudolph, Joshua Kelly, Tyler Boyd, Nick Westbrook-Akine, Daniel Brunskill, Dylan Redunz, Sebastian Joseph Day, Marlon Davidson, Jerome Baker, Luke Gifford, Quandre Diggs, Daryl Morley, and their long snapper and kicker. A lot of those guys are important names, so we're going to try to bring back at least a couple of these guys. The first player that I'm going to bring back is going to be Sebastian Joseph Day on a 2-year, $10 million deal. I've talked about him on a lot of these mock offseason videos. I'm a big fan of Sebastian Joseph Day because he doesn't cost a lot, but he's a really productive player. He's excellent in run defense and does have some pass rushing capabilities. And for a team like the Tennessee Titans, where they don't really have that high-end pass rusher, having somebody like Sebastian Joseph Day is probably a piece you want to keep because he is a great run stuffer, plays really well with this team, and I just think he's a good fit. So we're going to make sure we bring him back. We're also going to bring back Nick Westbrook-Akine on a 2-year, $16 million deal. This is a guy who had a fantastic end to the season. I mean, he was a touchdown machine to end the season. He's not necessarily a wide receiver 1 or even maybe a wide receiver 2, but he's just a really damn good wide receiver 3. And I felt like it was important to bring him back because he isn't going to cost you a ton, and he is a really proven and productive player this team should obviously try to keep. At 2 years, $16 million, you're only getting him for $8 million a year, and I do think that's a pretty good deal for somebody who is a trustworthy player who you know what you're going to get from. We're also going to be bringing back Dylan Redunz on a 2-year, $7 million deal. Now, I kind of decided to pick between Redunz and Daniel Brunskill because they both play on the interior of the offensive line, and you feel pretty confident about Peter Skoronski moving forward. You obviously have Lloyd Cushenberry, and then that right guard position, you kind of pick in between Redunz or Brunskill, and ultimately, I just decided to go with the younger player in Redunz. Ideally, he's just a rotational depth option. I'd prefer not to have to start him, but more than likely, I do think he will end up starting for this team because they have so many other positional needs like a right tackle that when you have somebody who can play as a starter, you're probably going to have to play them at least for another year or two. He's not a bad player. He's just a really average to slightly below average player, which is totally fine. I mean, he's just playing the right guard position. If you can make the team around him really good, he'll have some success. So we're going to bring him back on a cheap deal. But outside of that, we're going to bring back our kicker. We're also going to bring back our long snapper. We'll also bring back Luke Gifford, who is a kind of a special team guy who actually kind of came in there and played a lot of good snaps late in the season at linebacker. And lastly, we'll also bring back Daryl Worley on a 1-year, $3 million deal. Kind of had a surprisingly good season. He's been one of those dudes who just kind of goes from team to team, plays in practice squads, does some special team stuff, but came in here, played some free safety, and looked pretty darn good. So after bringing back all those names, we went from having $79 million all the way down to $56 million, which is still plenty of cap space to work with. So with that said, let's go ahead and talk about some positional needs for this team. When it comes to the Tennessee Titans, they do have a lot of needs on this team. The biggest one being, well, the quarterback position. Right now, they have Will Levis and Mason Rudolph, and this is a tough one because Will Levis has shown flashes, but it's very clear and obvious that his inconsistencies are an issue. He'll have a week where he looks so good and like the franchise quarterback, and then the following week he just looks like he doesn't even know what he's doing. He has so many meme-worthy plays that it kind of made this franchise look like a joke for a big portion of the season, and at some point they decided just to bench him and go with Mason Rudolph, who, by the way, Mason Rudolph is a free agent and I didn't bring him back. Mason Rudolph has been fine for this team, but again, he doesn't give you any sort of upside. There is a reason this team has the #1 overall pick. The team around Will Levis isn't particularly good, but it's also not bad enough to where you can't have success if you are a good quarterback. Like if you put a top 10 quarterback in this team, they will find a way to have success because there is some good players on this team. Will Levis just never really showed what he could actually do. I just think the inconsistencies were a little bit too much. That isn't to say that Will Levis can't be a starter in this league. He's still young and developing, so if he were to get traded to a team that has a job opening and has a better roster, maybe he could have some success, but I just don't think it's going to be with the Tennessee Titans. He has a cannon of an arm, but thought processing is just not one of his strengths. He can't read defenses at a high level, and sometimes he has some accuracy issues. So with you having the #1 overall pick, you have your selection of either Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. I think you're better off taking one of those guys because they are, in my opinion, better players than Will Levis. The next position is trying to find a wide receiver 2. I alluded to this earlier, but Nick Westbrook-Ikhine to me is just not a starting caliber wide receiver 2. He is a very, very good wide receiver 3. You obviously have Calvin Ridley who can play that wide receiver 1 position or 2 if you can find somebody who's even better. I do think finding a wide receiver 2 is something that this team needs to do, probably in their second round pick, because this is a pretty decent wide receiver class, and I think you can get a starting caliber guy in the second round to pair next to what you already have in Calvin Ridley and Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. You could go out there in free agency and maybe pay up for a guy like a T. Higgins or a Keenan Allen or Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper, but I kind of wanted to go with somebody a little bit younger who's going to be cheaper, so I ultimately didn't sign anyone in free agency, but the draft is a really good spot to find somebody who can play there. Then there's the right tackle position. I mean, this team had so many guys try and play the right tackle position. I think I heard that it was like 5 or 6 players who played right tackle at some point, and none of them worked out. They tried Nicholas Petit-Frere, they tried Jalen Duncan, they tried this guy, and this guy, and it just did not work out. Ideally, I kind of would like to maybe pick up like a left tackle and then move J.C. Latham back to right tackle, which I believe he played at Alabama. Don't quote me on that, but I believe he did. So if you are a team like Tennessee, you might want to be looking at picking up an offensive tackle because there is no way, shape, or form that you go into next year with Jalen Duncans or Nicholas Petit-Frere as your starting tackle, especially because those guys suck. So yeah, right tackle is a big positional need. And we also talked about the right guard position a little bit earlier. I do think that that is a position of need. Again, you do have Dylan Radunz, so it isn't like the biggest issue in the world because you have somebody there, but you would like to ideally find somebody who can be maybe a little bit better, which is obviously easier said than done, but I don't think it should be terribly difficult nor terribly expensive to find an upgrade. That could be something that you look to address maybe in next year's offseason or maybe through the trade market, but there are some guys out there they should look at. I also think the edge rushing position is a positional need. Now, they do have a number of guys who are productive players, guys like Arden Key, Harold Landry. We talked about Sebastian Joseph Day, and Jeffrey Simmons in the interior is a demon too. But they don't really have anybody who I think is like a 10 to 12 sack a season type of guy. Like, they need a dominant pass rusher, and in a draft class that has guys like Abdul Carter, maybe you take him with the first overall pick. Now, I don't necessarily think that this team should go out there and try to find somebody who is a veteran like a DeMarcus Lawrence or a Chase Young. That's just because those guys don't give you much pass rushing upside at this stage of their career. They'll get you like maybe 8 sacks, but you already kind of have that in Harold Landry, so why waste the money on somebody who isn't going to be an all-time great type of edge? So if you do go after an edge, maybe you go after somebody who has a ceiling of being a really good player, or maybe you just go out there and take Abdul Carter first overall. Linebacker is another positional need. Right now, their starting linebackers are Jerome Baker, who I'm not going to bring back, and Luke Gifford, who could get some playing time. So we're probably going to need to find somebody who can play in that other linebacking position. You obviously do have some other guys too, like Jack Gibbons, who went on IR later in the season. So you're going to want to find some linebacking depth, ideally somebody who can start early on. Then the last position you'll need is probably free safety. Right now, you do have Darryl Worley, who we decided to bring back, but if you could find an upgrade over him, especially because you just don't know if Darryl Worley is going to be consistently good throughout the season, you probably want to try to find an upgrade in that position. Which that then brings us to our free agency portion of the video. We currently have $56 million to work with, so we do have a lot of cash to go out there and sign some really big names, but we can't be reckless and stupid with our money. We have to be pretty wise and allocate our money in proper places. So we are going to begin with the biggest contract that I'm going to be handing out is going to be Ronnie Stanley on a 3-year, $60 million deal. He plays left tackle for the Baltimore Ravens, and he has been fantastic since he's been in the league. When he's healthy, he is just one of the best offensive tackles in the NFL, probably a top 5 tackle. For his contract, I kind of matched his contract with guys like Garrett Bowles, who also just recently signed a contract extension with the Denver Broncos. Ronnie Stanley is still relatively young, so I think he's 30 years old. By the time his contract's up, he's going to be around 33, 34. Getting him for around $20 million a year is kind of the league standard for his type of tackle prospect. He's not necessarily somebody who's going to break the bank, but he's also going to be somebody who fits in quite nicely for this team. In this situation, you put Ronnie Stanley out at left tackle, and then you flip JC Latham back to right tackle where he probably should be. Ronnie Stanley is excellent in run blocking. He's excellent in pass protecting. Last year, he was unbelievably dominant. Did have some penalties last year, but every single offensive tackle has penalties. It's not that big of an issue with this team. For Ronnie Stanley, he's going to give this offensive line a much needed upgrade, and I think if you bring in Ronnie Stanley, the only thing you're really going to need moving forward is maybe a right guard and maybe a center, depending on how Cushenberry looks after this injury. We're going to stick with the offense here and talk about bringing in Elijah Moore on a 2-year, $16 million deal. Elijah Moore is only 24 years old, has had some really good moments, but has never been able to have consistent moments. And I think a big reason why, especially this most recent year with the Cleveland Browns, was, well, his starting quarterback was Deshaun Watson and Jameis Winston. Now, I know you might be saying, well, it's not like Tennessee has a better quarterback situation here either, and you're right, but hopefully, if you draft a Cam Ward or a Shadur Sanders, you will have that answer at the quarterback position, and it will allow somebody like Elijah Moore to actually have success. Elijah Moore is somebody who I think kind of fits perfectly with this team. You already have Calvin Ridley, who's around 6'1". You have Nick Whisper-Kakune, who's pretty tall and can make some plays with his hands as well. Elijah Moore would probably play more of that slot / inside wide receiver who's going to do a bit more of the underneath work, some screen work, stuff like that. He's somebody who is going to be a perfect wide receiver too for this team. Hopefully you can get Calvin Ridley to like 1,200 receiving yards, and then Elijah Moore hopefully gets to around 700, 800 receiving yards, and then Nick Whisper-Kakune around 600 receiving yards. That would make a really good trio of wide receivers, and I think you can move confidently with them moving forward. But for the rest of my free agency plan, I'm really going to focus in on defense. The first player I want to bring in is going to be Drake Greenlaw on a 1-year, $8 million deal. Now, when healthy, Drake Greenlaw is a fantastic player. Unfortunately, we haven't seen him be healthy since, well, the Super Bowl, where I think he tore his Achilles. So it's a little concerning. It's a little bit risky, but we're only bringing him in on a 1-year deal, and I think that's all he's going to get in the market because there's just a lot of unknowns with his game. When he was healthy, he was a probably maybe 10, top 15 linebacker in the NFL. He was unbelievably dominant, played so well with Fred Warner, and I just don't know if the 49ers are going to have the finances to bring him back. They could bring him back, but if they aren't able to, I think Tennessee would be smart to bring him in. He's an explosive and athletic player when healthy. He's great in run defense. He's solid in pass coverage. We're only going to bring him in on a 1-year deal because I think that's truly all he would want to sign, because he probably wants to prove what he can actually do now that he's fully healthy, and if he plays at an extremely high level, he can then go out there and get a bigger, more massive contract, hopefully like a 3 to 4 year deal, maybe with the Tennessee Titans, maybe with somebody else. But for now, he's going to play alongside what we already have in our other linebackers, whether it's Gifford, Gibbons, or somebody else, and then Drake Greenlaw will play next to them. We're also going to be bringing in Malcolm Kuntz on a 1-year, $4 million deal. This deal is also very similar to what we talked about with Drake Greenlaw. Malcolm Kuntz in 2023 was an 8-sack per season guy. I mean, he felt like he was somebody who was going to really start to take a meteoric rise and become a really good pass rusher in the NFL. But sadly, last year he went down with an injury and did not play a single snap. So this is one of those other deals where you give them a 1-year prove-it deal, see if they can go in there, get you like 5+ sacks, hopefully more than like 10 or so. If he can do so, great. You just got a guy who had an excellent season on your team, and then you can try and re-sign him in 2026. But if he doesn't work out, well, then you just let him walk. There really is no risk here because you're ultimately just paying him $4 million to play on your team for a year. If it works out, great. If it doesn't work out, whatever. We can find somebody else next year. Again, Malcolm Kuntz in 2023 had 8 sacks, and I do think that he was on pace to start really improving his game. It's just unfortunate that he had an injury. So if you are Tennessee, you take a little bit of a flyer on him, see if he can get back to his form of 8 sacks, 10 sacks, and, you know, if it works, great. But if not, cool. Last player we're going to be bringing in that is of note is going to be Trevon Moehrig, 3 years, $27 million. He's going to be playing that free safety position for the Las Vegas Raiders. He has been unbelievably solid these past couple years, especially this year. He had a really solid year. He's excellent in coverage. He can make plays on the ball, great disruptor, also not terribly bad at being physical and making tackles downfield. You already, of course, have your guy in Amani Hooker, who's more of a strong safety guy. This guy is going to play your free safety position. He's going to roam around and really make this secondary look so much better. In a lot of ways, I do think the cornerback room of this team is pretty good when healthy. So for the most part, you really just need a backline defender like Trevon Moehrig, who can help with your doubles. He can help cover receivers. He can go deep. He's just a really good player. That's the best way to put it. But outside of that, all the other free agents that potentially could come in are like depth options, rotational pieces. And because we only have $7 million left, didn't want to bore you guys with random scrubs who are going to play practice squad minutes. But as I mentioned, we went from $56 million now down to $7 million. To sort of recap free agency, we brought in Ronnie Stanley, 3-year, $60 million. He's going to play left tackle and move JC Latham back out to right tackle. We brought in Elijah Moore on a 2-year, $16 million deal. He is hopefully going to be our wide receiver 2, more of our underneath slot receiver type of guy, who can also play on the outside too. We brought in Dre Greenlaw on a 1-year, $8 million deal, a prove-it deal to see if Dre Greenlaw still does have it. If he does, awesome. We have a potentially top 15 linebacker on the team. We bring in Malcolm Kuntz on a 1-year, $4 million deal. Same sort of vibe of Dre Greenlaw. He had a great year in 2023, 8 sacks. If he can replicate that in 2025, awesome. And then lastly, Trevon Moehrig on a 3-year, $27 million deal. He's going to be our backline free safety defender who's going to make a lot of plays for our defense. But with that said, let's go ahead and hop into our 2 3-round mock drafts. So here we are in the PFF mock draft simulator. We have the #1 overall pick, so we can basically pick whatever we want. I'm just going to tell you right now, we are going to go ahead and take Cam Ward in this situation because this team is going to need a quarterback. However, I do want to go ahead and give a shout out to Travis Hunter, who I think will be an awesome fit on this team, can play both corner and play wide receiver for this squad. Abdul Carter makes a ton of sense, might be the best player in this draft, could be a dominant edge rushing presence. Ted McMillan, Mason Graham, Will Johnson, all great players. Ultimately, though, we're going to go ahead and take, in my opinion, the best quarterback on the board, that being, of course, Cam Ward. To describe Cam Ward is a baller. He's a playmaker. He can make a lot of plays downfield, and that's kind of his go-to thing. He loves to bomb the ball away, which is something that Will Levis also like to do, but Cam Ward is a lot more polished at doing so. He does need to work on a few things. His accuracy can be a little bit inconsistent at times. He also might need to tone it down a little bit with the deep shots. Maybe you'd be a bit more inclined to just say, hey, check the ball underneath your running back. Make sure you hit your underneath drag routes. But I think as time goes along, his aggressiveness will be kind of honed in, and hopefully he can develop to be a more full-on quarterback. He's got a very strong arm. I think his mobility is solid. He's kind of your prototypical modern-day quarterback who just needs a little bit of some refining in his game. But here we are at pick 35, and this is actually going to be our last pick. And there's a few names that I kind of want to talk about here. Donovan Ezaraku, I'm a big fan of. Really dominant edge rusher for Boston College. Had a very productive year. Alec Ayamanor, to me, is just one of the best receivers in this year's draft class. Has great size, great hands, elite speed. He is chiseled like stone. He is an absolute freak monster. Jack Betch has been rising up draft boards as having a dominant Senior Bowl. Kind of a Chris Godwin-like guy. That's kind of the comparison I like to give here. You also have some other guys here like Landon Jackson, Princely. Jahad Campbell is here on the board, and I like that one a lot. JT Tuimoloau is also available, and Xavier Watts, and even Tyler Booker. I'm kind of thinking about going with Tyler Booker here because Tyler Booker is just a really good player. He could be available at pick 35 as well. There are a lot of names that I'm a big fan of. I'll just tell you right now. Right now, the names I'm thinking of are Donovan, Alec, Jack Betch, Jahad Campbell, and Tyler Booker. All of those names, to me, make a lot of sense for this Titans team. We already brought in a wide receiver in Elijah Moore, so I'm probably not going to go ahead and take the receiver, even though it would be nice to go ahead and get a stud like Alec Ayamanor, who I'm a big fan of. Jahad Campbell makes a lot of sense because it would give you that linebacker who could do so many other things than just play a pure linebacker position. But if Dre Greenlaw doesn't work out, then you can have him be his replacement. And even if Dre Greenlaw does return and play at a very high level and then re-signs with the team, you could just throw him in alongside like Jack Gibbons and what you already have in Luke Gifford, and he can kind of play right there. But Tyler Booker would fill in at right guard, take over for Dylan Reduns, and you'd have an offensive line of Ronnie Stanley, Peter Skoronski, Lloyd Cushenberry, Tyler Booker, and JC Latham. Not to mention Latham went to Bama too, so they already have a connection. This is extremely difficult. Now, they do have 2 4th-round picks, so they could go linebacker there, and this is a decent linebacking class. But there's nobody like Jahad Campbell available in the 4th round. But I also don't know if there's anybody like Tyler Booker available in the 4th round. So this is a extremely difficult position to be in. It's 50-50. to be honest with you, in this situation. I think I'll go ahead and just take Tyler Booker here because the offensive line could really use some work, and maybe you should focus on the offense, but maybe in the next draft we'll take Jihad Campbell. So this time we'll take Tyler Booker. All right, but this is our first of our 2 3-round mock drafts. Let's go ahead and hop into the next one. All right, but here we are now back up at pick number 1. Last time we took the quarterback in Cam Ward. I think maybe this time we either take Shedeur Sanders or Abdul Carter. Now, there have been some people talking about the Tennessee Titans just taking the best player available, and if that is the case, you're probably taking Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. So maybe we want to run with that experiment. Maybe the Tennessee Titans believe they can just rock another year with Will Levis, and then in 2026 they go all in on a quarterback, whether it's Arch Manning, Nico from Tennessee, or somebody else, whoever does decide to come out. So this time we'll take Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter is going to be a fantastic player in this league. He can play linebacker if you need him to in a pinch. Probably going to play more likely on the edge position. And Micah Parsons, like, this guy's going to get you around 10 sacks a season. Freak athlete, great pass rushing moves. Needs to maybe refine his technique a little bit, but he's extremely raw as a player and is still going to be a day one dominant player. Okay, we took the edge rusher last time. I'm a little bit less inclined now to take Jihad Campbell because we just took Abdul Carter. You could still go with Jihad Campbell here and just say, you know what, we're going to build such a dominant defense in front 7 that we're going to add an Abdul Carter who can get you 10 sacks. We already have Malcolm Kuntz, Harold Landry, Arden Key, Jeffrey Simmons, Devondre Sweat. We have Drake Greenlaw we added in. Now we add Jihad Campbell. I mean, that could be pretty dang nasty, but I don't think I'm going to do it here. I think I'm going to focus in on some other positions. I talked about Alec Ayamanor a lot earlier. The only issue I have with this one is because we brought in Elijah Moore and we have Nick Westbrook-Akine, I kind of feel like by adding an Alec Ayamanor, we're kind of putting in a little bit of a log jam at the wide receiver position. We could go with Ariante Urseries here. He can fill in at right guard, which would make a lot of sense. I'm not trying to take the same players, or else I would just take Tyler Booker again. Donovan Jackson can play guard. Wyatt Milam can play guard. Jonas Savaiinaea can play guard. Marcus Mbow can play guard. Cameron Williams could be our right tackle, but you already have JC Latham, so you don't really need that. I think I might take Donovan Jackson here. I feel a little bit more safe about him, more so than Ariante Urseries or some other guys. Donovan Jackson has been flying up draft boards, rightfully so. He's been playing tackle for Ohio State this year, so he does have flexibility to stick out at tackle, play right tackle if you need him to, or he can stick inside to guard. By taking Donovan Jackson, you'd probably put him at right guard. As much as I would love to take Jihad Campbell, you just took Abdul Carter, so we'll go on the offensive side here and finish up the offensive line by moving Donovan Jackson to the right guard position. All right, but this is our second of our 2 3-round mock drafts. But if you guys did go on to enjoy the video, hit the like and subscribe button. We are on the road to 20,000 subscribers, so subscribe if you're not subscribed. Love you guys. Peace.